Hello everyone and welcome back to another Guild Wars 2 video. Today I am going to be talking about classes, and specifically with the classes, or as I should say, the professions. I want to talk about some changes I would make to each profession. This is purely for fun. This is kind of just like a build theory crafting where I'm making skills and assessing areas where I think that they should be adjusted, fixed, and or changed. So, with this being said, considering this could be a long video, I'm going to jump right in with the heavy armor professions, starting with the Guardian. Now, for the Guardian, I made a video entirely on this subject, but the base virtues I find to be extremely underwhelming when compared to the elite specialization counterparts. So I basically just copied and pasted my virtue ideas from that video, so I'm just going to read them quickly. Virtue of Justice, retain the same passive effect. However, when you activate it, you and your allies apply burning the next few attacks, and you deal increased damage. For Virtue of Resolve, you retain the same passive, and for the active you heal, and in addition to healing you extend boons on allies for 2 seconds. It could be 1 second now that I think about it, because it could be pretty strong, but that was my idea. And then finally for Virtue of Courage, retain the same passive, but with the active you grant Aegis to allies and then gain a small barrier for yourself. These aren't, in my opinion, extremely powerful. I wanted to give them a little boost because I do think the current virtues, as trustworthy as they are, I don't think they stand out as much from the elite specialization counterparts, which you know, could be a good or a bad thing. Those were the virtues. Now I'm going to primarily go into changes I like to see for the weapons. So first off, I'm going to touch on the hammer. So for the hammer, I would really enjoy a change to the Ring of Warding. Now, I would make this Ring of Warding into a flip over skill, and I would just label it Collapse Ring of Warding, because it's a nice skill, especially for PvP, but oh, I should probably state this. This is a PvE focused video. I probably should have stated that in the beginning. Oh well. So Collapse Ring of Warding, it's basically just collapsing the ring into a center, pulling all enemies within the ring towards the center, and doing some damage. It doesn't immobilize them or anything, it just pulls them and then will damage them. It's not like you're stunning them or knocking them down. Yes, you can interrupt them, but that's what I would like to change, just to add a little bit more active playstyle with the hammer, because hammer's kind of like basic, you're just auto attacking all the time. So that's the hammer. Next up, I'd like to talk about the scepter. The scepter auto attack, Orb of Wrath, is widely regarded as being very sad and weird, considering how slow the projectile moves. If I were to keep it the same and not actually implement the changes that I am suggesting in a moment, I would just make the orb travel faster, because a lot of the projectiles in Guild Wars 2 are very slow, and playing a ranged playstyle is kind of weird. I feel like melee oftentimes gets much more praise and much more attention than ranged. Specifically Dragon Hunter, Longbow. Anyway, but for the scepter, my changes for the scepter would be to remove the auto attack as it is right now and create a 3 skill auto attack chain. The first one would be Wrathful Smite, just a basic strike. Next, Growing Smite, another basic strike that does a little bit more damage. And then a final attack, Force of Wrath, calling down the Force of Wrath from above to strike multiple enemies. I imagine this to just be like an insta-cast, similar to the Necromancer Scepter. I think having the insta-cast acknowledges the main issue that Scepter is currently having with its travel time on its projectile. So just making an insta-cast, like a beam from the heavens to shoot down real quick, and then a second one, and then for the Force of Wrath, I thought it could be like one of those fists from the smite symbol of smiting. Just have a giant spectral ghostly spirit fist just slam down and AoE damage 3 targets for a modest amount of damage. I would also make the chain pretty quick. I wouldn't have these long cast times. And then finally for the Scepter, in terms of its changes, I would change the ability Chains of Light to be like a spear projectile, and as it passes through enemies, it'll immobilize them and apply vulnerability, because I think Chains of Light right now is very weak. And yeah, the immob is cool, but it's just there, especially for PvP, because you just like, they get cleansed so easily. So you just be like sending out a spear of light to pierce enemies and immobilizes them as the spear passes through them, dealing a modest amount of damage, because right now the damage is not so great. It's quite low. So those are my changes to the Scepter. And those are all the weapon skills that I would change. And finally, there are 2 utility type skills that I would alter. This being the heal shelter, and I would add a elite spirit weapon. So first, I'm going to talk about shelter. Make it a consecration. It's cool. We don't have a consecration heal yet. So I would change this to a small AoE around the caster. You infuse the area with warding magic. You block some attacks for a short time and then leave the area where allies receive less damage. So it retains its old functionality with the blocking for a short duration. I would decrease it to 1.5 seconds instead of 2. But in addition to this, it leaves a small field where allies receive 8% reduced damage. Nothing crazy. It could even be a little bit lower. Just something to put it into the consecration trait line, or trait, and give it some more functionality. Finally, for my new spirit weapon, elite skill, I recommend Staff of Fury. I just kind of made this. It's basically like a ground targeted AoE, similar to Longbow, or Dragon Hunter Longbow 3, or Tempest Warhorn Air, where it's just a line AoE. Conjure a spirit staff to spin towards a direction, striking enemies and burning them. It just deals damage and will apply burning when they strike enemies on its travel time. Something pretty simple. So throughout this video, as I go through the professions, I will also be introducing my own elite skills. If I've done some elites here and there. So that was the Guardian. My favorite. So I had a lot to talk about with that. In other professions, I apologize, but there might not be as much suggestions, but that was the Guardian section. Next, I'll be talking about the Warrior. Now, for the Warrior, some of you may know I'm not a huge Warrior player, nor am I a huge Engineer player. So, with this said, once again, I'm focusing a bit more on the ranged playstyle to give it a little bit more speed, action, and engagement. So, for the Warrior Longbow, it's pretty much just like make the projectile slightly faster across the board, maybe except the second skill, because it's kind of okay. And yeah, that's all I gotta really say about the longbow. Now, let me talk about the rifle, because the rifle has much more tension with the overall warrior kit. So what I would do for volley, I would increase the number of shots to 8 instead of, I think it's at like 5 or 6. I just give it a couple more shots to give it a little bit of a boost. So that's what I would change for volley. And then I would make a flip over skill for the rifle 5th skill. I think it's like you use your rifle to like knock someone back. I would make it into a flip over skill if you successfully knock them back into Vengeance Shot. Focus in on the attacked target and fire a powerful bullet at them. This would kind of just be like, it's almost like a kill shot. Does a lot of damage, and it would apply some slow. It's a flip over skill. I just add a little bit more interaction with it because I think that the rifle could use a little bit of love. Once again, PvE focused. PvP, this would need to be nerfed and a little bit less powerful. But yeah, that's all I have to say about Warrior. And moving on a little bit to the Revenant. Now for the Revenant, I wanted to focus a little bit more on the hammer, once again with projectiles, and also I decided to tweak a couple of traits. So here we go. For the Revenant hammer, projectiles, increase the speed a little bit. Just a little bit. Come on, Annette, you got this. And then for an actual Revenant skill, they have Field of the Mists, which is the fourth skill, which protects you from projectiles. I would also have a flip over skill for this, just called Mischarge, where you detach the wall and you send it out towards a targeted location. Send out the wave, and the wall surges forward, damaging enemies and knocking them back. Just to get some, once again, more action and playstyle choices with ranged weapons. So that's the hammer. For Malik's, I decided to change Call to Anguish just a little bit. This is the utility skill, I believe? Yeah. It was recently changed to just apply chill. However, it has the potential to interrupt foes, and I would adjust this to, if it successfully interrupts, you just, apply some torment on them. And then now talking about some traits for Retribution. The minor trait, the one that gives you stability on evasion, and also the major trait, the one that gives you retaliation on evasion, I just combined those into a minor trait. So I've renamed it Unwavering Evasion. Gain stability and retaliation when successfully evading attack. And the thing that replaces the major trait, there's a motorcycle in the background. I created a major trait titled Prolonged Brawler. While above 50% health, barrier you receive is stronger, and then while below 50% health, healing you receive is stronger. So just something to bolster your defenses a little bit. So those are my recommended changes. How I'm feeling about Revenant. Adjust the hammer a little bit, and then just, touch up Malik's and touch up Retribution trait line a little bit. So those are the recommendations I have for the Revenant. Moving on to the medium armor section. I think we're going to start with Engineer first. Do I even have any recommendations for Engineer? Hold up. Oh, I do. Okay, moving on to Engineer. Okay, so for the Engineer, I have like 2 options. I know Rifle is a little weird for some, so I'd also say projectiles be a little faster, and I also made a change to net shot. I think I just gave it some more damage. So that's Engineer. I'm sorry, I don't have a lot of ideas for Engineer because I don't really play a lot of Engineer. I'm sorry. Please spare me. But yeah, those are, I know Rifle's an issue, so I'm moving on to Ranger is next. Yeah, we'll have Ranger next. So for Ranger, I made 2 different changes. For Longbow, I'd like to see Longbow once again be a little slightly faster, but Hunter's Shot. I made a flip over skill for Hunter's Shot, and I made an elite trap. So for Hunter's Shot, the flip over skill that I would like to see, just to give it some more play style, more like fast-paced, unpredictable gameplay, I made a new skill, Hunter's Opening. It's flip over, and it's a charge up ability where you hold down the button. The more you charge it, the more effects you get. So it's a charge up shot. The longer this is held down, the more damage the arrow does, and the more it pierces through enemies. So stage 1 does small damage and it pierces through 2 enemies. Stage 2 does more damage, it pierces through 3 enemies, and if you get to the 3rd charge, ultimately you hold it down for 3 seconds. It pierces through 5 enemies and does much more damage. Hunter Shot is the skill also, the third skill, which applies stealth to you and swiftness to your pet. So I thought like, oh, once you go into stealth, you can have like an opening shot to do increased damage at the cost of charging it up more. So that's the longbow, and then for the elite trap, I just have a wasp trap. It only makes sense. It's a trap, set a trap filled with venomous wasps. They deal damage, they cripple, weaken, and apply torment to enemies in the trap. So that's Ranger. Moving on to Thief. Thief, like many of the other medium armor professions, I just made a new elite skill for Thief. I think Thief is pretty okay right now. Maybe some adjustments to short bow, or give it some more preparations, like a preparation heal skill or an elite. However, I just was like, you know what? They don't have a elite signet. So I made an elite signet, Thieves Signet, passive, which is successfully evading an attack will replenish a small amount of endurance. And then the active, you become unblockable for a short duration, and your weapon skills forego their initiative cost. Could be pretty strong, 70-second cooldown. I don't know. PvP would see a lot of use out of this, I think. Could maybe even be a little bit too strong in PvP, because they're already really hard to catch. So they'd just be endurance on endurance, unblockable, and absolutely no initiative cost. So only for 3 seconds, but you know. Reminder, PvE focused. Next up, I want to talk about the Mesmer. We're finally going into the light armor professions, and I'm doing Mesmer first because Elementalist, which I'm going to be doing next, is a lot. So I want to do Mesmer, Necro, or no, Mesmer, Ellie, then Necro. It's a little weird of a out of order, but I hope you guys bear with me. So for Mesmer, I have 3 skill suggestions or changes I'd like to see. Firstly, I have introduced. Actually, no, we're gonna go heal skill first. All these are pretty much utility based skills. For the Ether Feast, I would allow this to be a clone. Heal yourself while summoning a clone. Apologize for that. So yeah, you're healing yourself and you summon a clone, and then heal for more with each active clone. I also recognize that Mesmer does not have a glamour heal skill, so I made one. It's how I would say called Uplift. You just conjure a road of healing energy. You get a heal on cast and then healing over time based on the pulses for the AoE. Pretty simple. And then I also realized that they don't have an elite mantra, so I made one. You can see a pattern forming. So this elite mantra is Mantra of Clarity. Prepare a spell to heal allies in a targeted location. Finishing this mantra reveals enemies around you and grants you protection for a short time of 4 seconds. I think the active is nice, you know, a good reveal. This would also be nice in PvP and World versus World, and it also is a little bit more supportive. Time Warp is already a great buffing elite skill that Mesmer has, but they don't have the necessarily. Mesmer doesn't have a lot of like heal centric support options. They're very much like secondhand support. So those are my recommendations for Mesmer, and yeah, moving on to Elementalist. This Elementalist one's going to be a doozy. In order to save time, I'm going to summarize basically the changes that are adjustments I'd like to see for Elementalist. Basically, I introduced an auto attack chain to Staff and Scepter for each of the attunements. So in order to just go quickly, I'm going to just explain them, and you'll see the screens. So for Fire Staff, we're starting with Staff. Fire Staff, Spark. Ignite your foe in a spark. Flare. Send out a fast-moving flare to sear your enemy. And then, of course, Fireball. Fireball hasn't changed. Moving over to Staff Water auto attack. I created a Water Whip. Launch a whip of water towards a foe, piercing enemies and healing allies while traveling. The second flip over, Smooth Return. Call the Water Whip back, piercing enemies and healing allies while traveling. And then finally, Water Blast, same as it already is. You can maybe see a pattern forming. The third attack is typically the one that we already have for the autos. Thirdly, Staff Air. The first auto attack is Spontaneous Zap. Charge your enemy with a quick zap of electricity. Flip over, second skill. Electrify. Charge your enemy with an expanding electric charge. This does some AoE damage to 3 targets. And then, finally, Chain Lightning. Hit multiple foes with arcs of Chain Lightning. 5 targets. I boosted this up to 5 because I think air, as it can be powerful, it's sometimes weak. And then Earth. Where did I place Earth? Here we are. Staff Earth. We're moving on to the 4th staff. Earth, auto attack. The first skill is actually the one we already have. Stoning. Hurl a rock and weaken your foe. The flip over would be Rumbler. Release pressure below your enemy, damaging and crippling them for a moment. Very short, 1.5 seconds. And then its final auto attack chain for staff 3. Stalagmite release. Release a cluster of stalagmites underneath your enemy. So they just shoot up, do a little bit of AoE damage in a 120 radius, some bleeding and cripple. So those are the staff changes I'd make, basically just adding auto attacks to make them more fun, I think, because sometimes you're just sitting there like, oh, my 3rd skill's off cooldown. 3rd skill, I wanted to be a bit more playstyle where you can move and actually still fight and feel like you're doing things quickly. So yeah, staff, and now for Scepter. Scepter Fire, I kept the same. No change. Scepter Water, I have some auto attack chains. For Scepter Water, first attack, Ice Shards. Fire 3 ice shards at your foe. They now bleed. Auto attack, second skill. Twin Spikes. Fire 2 ice shards towards a foe. Bleeding. And then the final auto attack for Scepter Water, Grand Spike. Fire a larger ice spike towards your foe, piercing enemies and healing allies. Not as much healing as the staff, but just a little bit, considering Scepter does have some like weird hybrid, and I just wanted to, you know, strengthen the support aspect if you do play like Scepter Warhorn Tempest. And then for Earth auto attack. First one, Stone Shards. Fling stone daggers at your foe to bleed them. Second, Spire Uplift. Force 2 rock spires from the ground. And then finally, Stalactite Shower. Force 2 rock spires, or no, I didn't change the description. Basically, it's like a shower of rocks. 3 strikes and 3 bleeding. I didn't change the description though, so I apologize for that. In addition to the auto attacks for Scepter Earth, I would also change the current Dust Devil, which is the Scepter Earth 3 skill. I changed this to Dust Cyclone. Spile debris towards an area. And it does 4 ticks of damage. It now does more, it does bleeding and also will blind. Because I think Dust Devil, it can be nice with the blind, but I just think it's overall pretty weak. So, and it's pushing Earth a little bit more into the condition play style. So those are the 2 weapon auto attacks that I would change. Staff and Scepter, to give them a bit more oomph. Finally, I made an Arcane Elite skill. I titled this Arcane Barrage. Barrage a target location with arcane missiles. The way I picture this is like the Kala Scorch Razor, the F3 ability, where you're summoning the missiles from the mist. But instead of just like, you know, summoning from a mist, you're just like barraging a location with arcane missiles. They do damage, they critically strike. So that's Elementalist. I apologize, I told you it was going to be long. Okay, now, moving on to Necromancer. It's a little less wacky, but Necromancer still has some decent changes. Oh, that was a lot to edit and also just go through. Okay, finally, we are ending with the Necromancer. And the 2 main areas that I wanted to focus on was the staff, the dagger, and I guess the 3rd area is an elite well. So, let me first go over the staff changes. I made an auto attack chain for the staff, because I feel like long-range weapons are getting kind of boring because there's not a lot to do. And I also changed some other skills. Also, staff marks have been very boring, especially against non-moving enemy types in PvE because they don't trigger the marks. So it's kind of just sad. You know what I mean? So, the auto attack. The first one, Shadow Vex. Vex your target with instant pain. There's no projectile on these. The flip over, Shadow Affliction, damage your target with instant pain and bleeding. Just 1 bleed for 2 seconds. And the final attack, Necrotic Grasp. Conjure a grasping hand from below your target. Strike your foe and those around them. Damage, 2 bleeding, and some life force. This is like kind of like the Doom fight when the hand comes up from the portal, but instead of a portal, it's just like the hand just shoots up. Maybe there could be like a little portal effect. That's what I had in my mind. So I changed the marks by eliminating the first two and then kind of fixing up Putrid Mark. So Mark of Blood, it's gone. Mark of Blood is gone. I changed it to Blood Bomb. Conjure a bubble of blood, which will explode moments later. You damage enemies and heal allies around the area of effect. Some damage, 2 bleeding, and a heal. Radius of 240. And the third ability that I decided to take on was to adapt Chillblains. The marks that I got rid of, I adapted into the skills. So, third skill. Chilled, no, not Chilled Expanse. Where is it? Chilled Scythe. There we go. That was a weird pause. Okay. I lost track of it. So third ability, Chilled Scythe. Send out a slow moving scythe, damaging and poisoning foes it passes through. This has a flip over skill called Chilled Expanse. It's a flip over, and you detonate the scythe, causing a cone of toxic chilled ice to blast outward, forward from the direction of the scythe. This applies chilled 1 poison and does some damage. So those are the 3 major changes I would do: an auto attack chain, blood bomb, and then the chilled scythe, which, you know, adapts Mark of Blood and Chillblains. I also adjusted Putrid Mark to apply regeneration for any allies within the explosion of Putrid Mark, just to have that boon. Because I know Mark of Blood, the regeneration boon, is really nice, especially for support Necromancers. So those are my changes to staff. And finally, for Dagger. Pact, I know Dagger just needs some love, I feel like. So, Pact, the Blood Pact, the one where you immobilize your foe and bleed yourself. I have a flip over skill for this, an idea. I call it Pact Advantage. It's a flip over, which you just shadow step behind your targeted foe and you deal massive damage. It's just a big strike for the dagger. So that's what I would change for the dagger. And finally, we've come to the finale. I made an elite well, and I've titled it Well of Terror. And I was doing bounties today, and I was like, whoa, they kind of already have it. It's one of the bounty perks that they get, basically. So it's an elite well. You summon a well of pure terror, immobilizing foes within the field, and you fear them. The immobilize isn't on the bounties, but I just thought it'd be very interesting to have a field where they're locked down, but they're afflicted with the fear. And then you could take advantage of that one dread talent or trait that no one really uses, at least that I've seen. So those are my changes to Necromancer. Hope you enjoyed. No, but seriously, all in all, thank you everyone so much for watching this long video. I'm going to put timestamps so you guys can conveniently jump if you've been using them, thank God. But this is just a fun video that I've decided to make, expanding my creativity and also taking a look at professions through a PvE lens. Overall, I feel like Arena should, you know, do something to keep ranged combat more engaging. Sometimes I feel like I'm just like a turret. I think Mesmer has a really nice ranged weapon because of its blink, its mobility. You have multiple blinks, you can move around a lot. Positioning is key. But yeah, thank you for watching. Those are just my ideas. What I would change if I was going into 2020 and I had the ability to change skills and or add them. Like the video, reflect it, comment below on your thoughts on your favorite profession, any of your ideas that you'd like to see changes. I didn't really cover elite specializations. Those could be very separate videos on their own. This is just a mega video for all the professions baseline. So yeah. Subscribe for more content, like the video, reflect it, comment below, and I'll see you guys in the next video. All my links are down below in the description box. Wink wink. Bye!